Welcome to morning gentle yoga. So we're going to start in a seated position, and one thing that might be helpful is to elevate your hips a little bit. So I'm going to take a blanket. This is just a regular, they're like the size of a double bed Mexican folded blanket, cotton blanket. You can use any blanket you've got. Sometimes I use a wool blanket, whatever I got handy. So if you fold it up so that when it's folded you have an inch or two of space, and then you sit right on the edge of that, it helps your hips kind of get steady. And especially the vast majority of us can probably use that little extra bit of lift. So you don't want to sit right in the middle of it, you want to sit right on the edge of it, because it sort of lifts your hips and the knees slope down, which makes it a little easier to get the spine to mostly be held without a lot of grip. So the back doesn't collapse backwards or push you forward, and you're able to sort of sit nice and upright. Now, if you need extra support under your knees, you can throw in some extra blankets or pillows or that sort of thing. I like this position where you just rest the palms on the legs. I find this very soothing. It's called the mudra of calm abiding, and it's possible because I know that. That little suggestion is all that's needed for me to find this very calming and soothing. But there are other options. You could put the palms up, you could put one palm inside the other. That's also nice. I like that one too. Just pick some way of resting your arms. We're going to just take a few moments to get steady. Pay attention for a few moments. So it's a little breath awareness, mindfulness, meditation, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same. Just get present with the environment that you're in. So there might be some sounds or distractions in the environment. It's just part of our practice. So when we were practicing in a studio together, or whatever gym space we could carve out for ourselves, we might have had music on to kind of create an atmosphere. Here I'm listening to the sound of my washing machine, that sort of thing. So there might be just some background noise. Just acknowledge that that's present. If you want to put on something that's a little more soothing, like some music, you can do that. And then get present for your body and just notice, like, is there one shoulder that's a little bit different than the other? Is one hip calling your name a little bit more than the other? Just notice if there's some places in the body that need our attention today. And then the last thing we're going to just notice is the mind and the heart. So our mind and emotions. If there's things that are going on in your mind, maybe you're scared about something that's coming in the future, just the future in general, or maybe there's some sort of sadness about something that's already happened. Maybe you're feeling really happy today, whatever it is. Just acknowledge your current mind state. Recognize that sometimes the mind will distract us from our practice, and we'll think about stuff or make grocery lists, that sort of thing. We're just going to come back to the practice whenever we catch ourselves. And then we're just going to pay attention to the breath. And we're going to do some work for the neck. Now, the necks are sensitive, and there is, out of the back of the skull here where the occipital ridge is, there's a ton of nerves that come out of that part of the skull through some of the little vertebrae in the neck that come out through the shoulder and go down through various parts of the body. And then of course we've also got some fairly significant artery and vein in this area as well. So we're going to be kind, and we're going to treat this our neck with a lot of respect. But as we can, we'll drop the chin forward, and then sometimes it feels okay to me to get my ear really close to the shoulder and kind of roll my head up and over. But if that's not okay, it's a little too pinchy, angle the ear more at like a 45-degree angle and see if that angle feels like it's a little bit better. So we're just making sure we're not collapsing or pinching anything on the bottom side while we're stretching things over on the other side. Sometimes I like to do movement, sometimes I like to be more still. So you can kind of guide yourself. I'm just doing one shoulder at a time. And there's a little kind of, I can feel some tension right there that kind of makes everything tighten up. So I'm going to pause with that. Relax both my shoulders, change the angle slightly. Draw my shoulder blade down. Just work in that spot where I found resistance. Gently, with a lot of respect. Back around, it feels a little better, a little bit looser. So I'm going to take myself to the center, and then when it feels pretty ready, I'm going to go over the other shoulder. And again, change the angle so it feels okay, change the movement pattern, maybe stay still. Where are the places in your neck that are tender or in need of some attention? So I didn't find anything too crazy on that side, so I'm just going to come back to the center, let my head float up, and then noticing how that's going. I'm going to do some little circles for the shoulders. So we're going to come back to the shoulders in a little bit, but we'll do some little circles here just to get some movement going. Oh. Go in the other direction with the circles. All right. Going to take ourselves a little bit wider with the legs. So we're going to kind of lean back and open up the space so that the feet, the soles of the feet are touching. And then we're going to kind of lean forward and lean back so we get this little kind of cat-cow shape. So as I lean forward, I'm bringing the pelvis as far forward as makes sense. There's no discomfort, but I'm also lifting the breastbone, kind of broadening across the chest. And then as I lean backwards, kind of letting the pelvis rock back, I can grab the backs of my knees. I'm a little too close to my furniture, but grab the backs of the knees if I need to kind of create that back space. So just these little kind of cat, cow, or cobra and cat moves. Ugh. However you want to think about it. I like to think about it more like a cobra and a cat, because that, you know, gives us this image of that kind of broadening across the chest and opening up that space. Ugh. Okay, 2 more of those. All right, so now we're going to take one leg out straight. I'm going to take the left leg out straight and the right leg bent in. I'm going to twist around to my right, but before I get there, I'm just going to loosen things up just a little bit. Just do a little washing machine. And then I'm going to twist around towards this bent knee. Now I've energized my left leg, so I've got the knee bent slightly, the toes are pointing straight up. I'm going to sit up nice and tall. There's a tendency when I do this version of the twist for me to lean off my left hip. So I'm going to try to keep the weight centered on both my sit bones evenly. And then I'm just going to let this left leg kind of do its thing. A little bit active there, spreading out my toes. Holding onto my ankle because that's the most convenient place, but you could also reach around and hold on to the knee. So still kind of in this slight turn to my right, I'm gonna reach out and see if I can get hold of my big toe. You can also just hold onto the shin, and then we'll take this arm up and overhead. Now, I'm gonna lift out, stretch a little longer, come over, reach all the way over with the other arm, lift out. I'm gonna do this one more time. So what I'm trying to do is create more length on that bottom side, and then you can leave the arm overhead or wrap the arm around behind the back as it seems like a good idea. Be kind to this part of your low back, so if it feels a little dicey, back off a little bit. Two more big breaths. And then we're going to come out of there. Undo that leg. Give both legs a little shimmy. And then just notice, because it still feels like I'm slightly turned that way and slightly leaning. So I'm going to let all the fluid in my spine kind of redistribute itself. And there's a point where I feel a real shift between slightly twisted and back to center. And I'm just feeling, kind of waiting for that little sense of things kind of coming back to neutral. Right kind of now is where I'm feeling that final little bit. So once I feel that shift, then I'm ready to do the other side. And this is, you know, kind of developing more subtle awareness patterns of the body, but I think it's interesting. So we're twisting again. Now I'm twisting to my left. Again, I want to double check that I'm not leaning out of my right sit bone too far. You know, we can let the right hip go forward a little bit. That can aid us in the twist, and definitely a side bend. That's not an issue, but it's just a matter of like the weight distribution. Just keep the weight kind of even on the pelvis. Especially if you have low back issues at all, let your hip go forward a little bit. It'll help. It'll be nicer. Kinder. I'm always after like some upper back kind of action, intensity or focus, because that's where I carry a lot of stress. So I like to try to twist my shoulders, especially those last few breaths here. Less the neck and more a little bit in the shoulder for me. And then I'm coming out, and again, I'm gonna reach out. Maybe I get hold of that big toe, do a stretch. I'm kind of checking out the angle. I might need to change it, so I'm gonna bring myself up. Create some length on that side, reach out a little further. One more time, I'm gonna come back. And again, I'm like, how long can I make that space as I take myself over? And then choosing an arm position that makes sense for you. And again, being kind to this kind of lower back side over here. There's some tender little muscles in that area, so just being nice to them. Sometimes a little bit of stretching is good. You gotta find the spot that's not too much. Embrace the Goldilocks principle just right. Two more breaths. I'm rarely static in a yoga pose. I like to sort of explore them. You know, like check them out. When I do yin, I start that way, and then because yin poses are held longer, I can kind of sink in and get still. But with a practice like this, a more gentle practice, or you know, a little bit more on the active side of things. By active, I just mean more movement, less static. I find like a little bit of in and out is really lovely. Now you should practice and see which way you like it better. Maybe you like the in and out, maybe not. All right, so we're gonna go for a wider angle with the legs. Now, you can keep the elevation under the hips. For a lot of us, that's gonna be a good idea. For me, I move the blanket to under my knees. So that's my more vulnerable area because I hyperextend a little bit in the knees. So put props or support where it's appropriate for you. Now with the legs out wide, we're gonna do three kind of shapes. So we're gonna turn towards one leg and fold forward. Now forward folding can be a little bit tricky. So We want the pelvis to come with us. When the pelvis stops moving forward, we stop, which might mean that you're sitting upright. So maybe the pelvis lets you lean forward. Maybe it lets you lean forward so far that you can almost touch your forehead to your shin. In order for me to get my forehead to my shin, I have to let my upper back round. And that's the part that can be tricky. So sometimes it feels really great, and sometimes it feels like too much. So pay attention. And again, you know, this sit bone has a tendency to get less weighty, and I'm not worried about that for this pose. So I'm just letting everything get kind of heavy in the lower body. Fold in toward this leg however far it's going to let me. Basically, I'm laying on my leg with my chest. I'm not getting any farther. It would be... I would have to give up muffins to get any farther, and that's just, life is too short. So this is good enough. So we're going to take a couple more breaths. Okay, so we're going to come up. Now, when I get to the middle, I'm just going to pay attention. Does one leg feel different than the other? Does one side of my back feel different than the other? Does one hip feel a little different? Now, you know, because that involved a little bit of a twist and a little bit of a forward bend, there's definitely a difference for me. And so again, I'm letting this kind of shift happen where things get a little softer, a little freer feeling. And then I'm going to go straight down the center. And again, for some of us, straight down the center means we're just sitting upright. It doesn't mean that we're leaning forward. It depends on how your anatomy is structured. Some of us, the pelvis does not move forward. I'm keeping my heart lifted so that my back is one long angle, one long trajectory, because that's as far as my pelvis really wants to move forward today. I could round over and put my elbows on the floor, but that involves almost more of a slumpy feeling in my low back, which sometimes I go for, but not today. Today, a little bit more connected. You get to pick, though. You're at your house. I'm not there. Just virtually. So we're going to take about 4 more breaths here. And I'm trying out like this idea of flexing through my feet, bending my knees a little bit. That lets my quads connect a little bit more. My hamstrings let go just a little bit. So my pelvis shifted forward like 0.5 millimeter. I just felt that tiny bit of change. Okay, so then we're going to take a big breath, hold that breath in, or come all the way up as you breathe in, and then pause. And again, you can kind of shake everything out. We're just paying attention. Now this is a totally different sensation for me than it was when I went over the one leg. There's much more symmetry to the sensation, and I like it. It was pleasant to come out of that pose. Very pleasant to come out of that pose. Okay, so I'm going to the other side. So I've turned and I'm folding this way, and again, I've got my leg kind of connected here. Now this side for me is very different. On this side, it's really easy for me to kind of snuggle myself right up down against my thigh. This side, there's a little bit more resistance. There's just a little difference in the hip. And I don't know if it's a difference in the hip joint itself or just the muscles around the hip, because I'm right-handed. I use my right leg to do things like push the gas pedal on the car. I don't have anything to do with the left leg. Automatic transmission cars, you only use your right foot. So sometimes that creates like subtle changes in the way the hip experiences life, poses and other things. Okay, we're going to take 2 more breaths. And then I'm going to come all the way up. Oh. All right. Oh. So just noticing. So again, there's a really radical difference, one hemisphere to the other, when I go over the one leg versus going straight down the middle. Oh. All right, so we're gonna kind of hybridize these things. So we're gonna bring both feet back together. You can pull your feet in as tight as you like. I'm gonna kind of shift a little bit so that my sit bones go back out behind me. And then we're gonna fold forward right down the center, but with the legs in this position. You can grab hold of the feet if you like, and kind of, it's almost like you're kind of opening them like a book. It's just a way of sort of creating some space through the metatarsal area of the foot. You know, if it feels good, awesome. If it starts to bother your knee, don't do that. Don't do it that far. Don't do it that much at all, as the case may be. And just kind of creating a little shift. Like for me, it just feels like a little metatarsal massage. Okay, so 2 more breaths here. I have these clingy things on my windows that diffuse the light and blur things. They make rainbows on the floor, and somehow my toes were right in the spot where they were green. I thought I was cutting off my circulation for just a second. Luckily that was not the case. Alright, so from here we're going to go into a little sequence on the floor. We're going to do some shoulder work, we're going to do some hip work, some psoas release. We need a nice stretch for the legs. So you're going to need, if you have one, a yoga strap. Now, yoga straps are a great investment because they're not very expensive. In fact, I've even seen them in the dollar aisle or at the Five Below, that sort of thing, for somewhere between $2 and $3. Even as like the most expensive they get is around $12 or $14. So they're not crazy expensive. But what's great about them is that they have a buckle. You can run the strap through the buckle. The strap is quite robust. It's not gonna stretch. But if you don't have one of these, kind of think about what are those properties. So what's going to be good and strong. So a scarf could work, a towel. I've used like a dish towel or a hand towel. You can use a dog leash, anything that's that's going to be a little bit strong, so it's not going to tear on you. That will work. Now I like having a loop. So if you have a strap that has a buckle, go ahead and loop it if you want to, and then you can follow along in the way that I'm going to practice this. I'm going to actually put this under my back so that I can hold it without my hands. Now, that doesn't work out. You can always hold it with your hands. Just have a loop that you can put your hand through. Okay, the other thing I'm going to have is a blanket nearby because I'm going to add that to the end of my world in a little bit. And then I'm going to also have something like, it could be a block, or you can use your blanket folded up, or you could use a pillow. So just something that we can put under the legs and potentially under the hips as well. I see one of my furry coworkers creeping up on me here, so it's possible that this will soon become furry coworker yoga. We'll see. So we're gonna lie down on the back, and then the first thing we're gonna do is some shoulder stuff. So you just wanna make sure that you can reach all the way over your head. And in a minute, we'll also suggest that we're going to make kind of a circle. So we want to be far enough away from the furnishings that we're not going to smack anything with our hands. Now this position right here that we're in right now, or that I'm in, I don't know what you're doing, but hopefully you're mimicking me a little bit. This is called constructive rest. So my feet are not too close. They're far enough away that it feels like my leg bones relax into the hip socket. So if my feet are too close, I can feel that my leg muscles kind of kick on to try to hold me there, and there's a lot of tension and pressure. So I'm going for no tension and pressure here. And then we're going to do a simple movement, but I think it's really fun. So you're going to reach down really firmly. So my thumbs are up, my pinkies are down, and my palms are facing my hips. And then reaching through the arms, we're going to come up overhead, and the whole way we're going to stretch through the arms. So right here, I'm lifting almost like I'm trying to lift myself off the floor. I'm going to keep going all the way to the floor. Now by slowing this down, I make all these muscles in my arms work quite a bit to do this action. We're working against gravity in many ways. So slowing things down nice and slow. We're just going to go up overhead, reaching through the arms the whole way. If you can't go all the way to the floor, just go as far as your range of motion allows, coming all the way back. Reaching all the way down, coming all the way up. Now this is the last one. We're going to do like this, and then we're going to change it. So we're going to come right to chest height, reach, grab the elbows, and then we're going to lower the elbows as close to the chest as we can, reach through the elbows, come up and overhead. Come back. Come up and overhead. And again, as far as your range of motion allows, this just takes some of the leverage out of it. So we might be able to kind of hug the arms in a little bit. I'm trying to hold my elbows, and as I come over my head, I'm just sort of hugging the arm bones towards one another. Not trying to squeeze my head, but just create stability in the shoulder. Okay, last one like this. Coming back. Now, I have got my right arm on top, so I'm going to keep that and grab my left upper arm and just pull it across my body. And as I pull my left arm to the right, I'm going to take my left shoulder blade and try to slide it down into neutral. So it's laying on the floor as best I can while my right arm is making it impossible to put that thing on the floor. So there's a really nice stretch through the rotator cuff muscles here, and it should feel good. If it feels crummy, either change the angle of your arm or don't pull that hard. You might be overdoing it. Okay, coming back to the center, I'm going to let go, put the other arm on top, go up and overhead, and then come back. Up and overhead, and again, I'm kind of right here, hugging the elbows towards each other, kind of hugging those upper arms in, and then bringing it back. Up and over, hug a little bit, hello, coming back. One more time, up and over, hugging a little bit in the center. Hello, coming back, hello. And then I'm grabbing my upper arm and kind of coming across. And again, I'm going to try to take this right shoulder blade and pull it down, back where it belongs, onto my upper back. I'm holding above the elbow so I don't cause any trouble for the elbow. This is one of my favorite things. It just gets into this little space between the shoulder blade and the upper back in a way that I think is really nice. All right, 2 more breaths. Now, we're going to continue kind of with this arm and roll to the side. This is where you might want like a block or a pillow, something where you can kind of support your head. You can also use a folded blanket. And then we're going to take the arm overhead. Now, once we get to a point, you can either come straight across, almost like you're closing a little clamshell, or you can continue the circle sweeping down and around. It'll depend on how the shoulder feels. Again, there's a kind of sensitive area between the collarbone, the shoulder blade, and the head of the arm bone where a lot of nerve endings live. If it feels like it creates pinching, numbness, or tingling in your hand, you want to change the angle. Reach out through the arm, go overhead, and really stretch the whole way. I find after I do 1 or 2 of these that I can reach a little farther. Okay, kindness when you're getting towards that space. Right about here at this diagonal is where things get a little tricky, all the way to that diagonal. So be mindful of that. 2 more. All right, so we're going to turn this all the way into a twist. So I'm going to just let this arm come around. I'm turning my whole upper back with it. Adjust the upper back. Add a little blanket in there as you like. Oh. And sometimes I like to elevate the bottom and then draw the top leg over the top of the stack. So that gives me just a little bit more stretch through the outer hip and a nice stretch through the chest muscle as well. Oh. Pay attention and just make sure your fingers don't go numb. Numb fingers means we're pinching nerves in the shoulder. And we want to avoid that if we can. It's not the end of the world for a short period of time, but we don't want to do it for a long period of time. Oh. All right, now this is where my strap is going to come in handy. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring this top leg in, and I'm going to put the strap around my foot. Ugh. Now, I'm going to hold onto the loop for this one. You can, if you have a long enough arm or soft enough hamstrings, hold onto your big toe. So I'm going to roll my hips back up so that I'm stacked pretty well. This leg I can stretch out long or leave bent for more support. And again, I'm going to throw my little support in here underneath my head. So I'm stretching this inner thigh portion of my leg. So I'm trying to find, and it also makes me use my core, which is why I like this version. I'm trying to find some stability here. And then I'm just finding the angle that gives me the best stretch there in that inner thigh. Sometimes it takes a little bit. I got into doing this pose because I have some space limitations in my view, and I've forgotten how great it is until this summer. Oh. And so it mimics this standing version where you hold onto the big toe and take the leg out to the side, but you know, we've got the floor here instead of the opportunity to fall over. I recommend both ways. Okay, so we're going to stay here for about 4 more breaths, then we're going to turn this into a hamstring stretch. Oh. All right, to turn this into the hamstring stretch, I'm going to take my hip all the way down to the ground. Okay, I'm going to remove this from under my head. You might need head support, so throw in some if you need it. And then you can just hold onto the loop. I'm going to take this strap under my upper back and then position it so that I've got that appropriate amount of stretch there in my hamstrings. I'm pushing my heel up and away and pulling my toes towards me. And that just lets me take the pressure away from holding on so that I can stretch the shoulder out a little bit. So this strap is pulling a little bit down on my shoulder. I'm going to roll my shoulder blade underneath, reach that arm out, and turn my head the opposite direction. So I'm getting a little hamstring stretch, but I'm also getting a little opening right here through the front of my shoulder. It's not a strong stretch there. It's quite mild, but there is sensation, and so I know something is happening. And again, often with the neck, it's better to have less sensation than more. Like if you feel it just at the very beginning of sensation, that's a good place to start working. It doesn't have to be super duper strong, right? So to go back to the Goldilocks metaphor, the baby bear version was always the right version. So that tells us baby bear's not in the middle. Right? The baby bear version is quite mild. And so that's what we're aiming for. Just right. Just right. So we're going to stay here for about another 3 breaths. Okay, so we're going to bend the knee, slip the strap off. And then I'm just going to pause for a moment here. We're going to do one more thing before we do the other side. But first, getting the strap out from underneath my back. And just pause it. So I want to feel that right shoulder because I did some work for the shoulder. I did a bunch of stuff for my right leg. it's kind of nice to sort of stretch out and just see, is there a difference between the right hemisphere and the left? And is the difference, if there is one, is that difference pleasant or unpleasant? And for me, there's just a sense like the right side's been sort of pulled a little bit. It's a little longer, a little softer, a little closer to the ground feeling than the left side. And I would suggest it's pleasant. I like the way it feels. So those things all say, let's do the other side, right? Let's try the other side the same way. But if I'm sore or tender or something doesn't feel right, then when I do the second side, I change it a little bit so that I can learn from my practice. This has been the way that I've been practicing for a long time. It's like, that wasn't very nice. Let's try something slightly different. Okay? So we're gonna roll over. We're gonna do the shoulder thing first. So we're coming over. And again, like support your head, bend your knees so you're nice and stable. And the top arm is gonna make this circle and we're gonna be kind. The angle might need to be up higher, not down lower, in order to be safe in the shoulder. So find the right angle that works for you so that there's no pinching or tingling or numbness. As we get into this area, right from about that diagonal toward the ear all the way to the diagonal towards the hip, that's the most tricky portion. Let's do 3 more of those. Stretching the arm through this range of motion. I'm getting a little longer each time, which is kind of fun. And then I'm going to let that turn me into a twist. So I'm just going to take that all the way over. Oh, that feels nice. I'm going to throw my legs around one another. And I'm trying to get this kind of sense of stretch in the chest muscle without causing any numbness or tingling. That usually for me means the shoulder needs to touch the ground. Otherwise there's a hyperextension at the shoulder and that's where we can get the pinchiness. And then by letting my legs sort of fall over this direction a little bit to the right, I get this nice stretch on the outer left hip. So find the right amount for you. Sometimes I find those big sighs, moans, groans, whatever they might be, quite beneficial. Sometimes I forget you guys are here. Oh goodness. Okay, we're going to take 2 more breaths. Alright, so we're going to stay on the side, but we're going to take this to Vishnu's couch pose. Oh. So I'm going to grab this strap. I'm going to put this loop around my foot. I'm going to hold on to the loop. And then I'm going to try to find a place where I'm getting my inner thigh stretch without falling over here. Keeping the hips nice and stable. Just finding the right amount of stretch there. Okay, here we go. We're going to turn this into the hamstring stretch. So I'm going to take this guy, put it over my shoulder here, and as I roll down, I'll slide it around under my back so I can get this little bit of pressure. So again, I'm just putting it over the top of my shoulder so it gives me, as I let my legs sort of fall into it, it sort of draws a little bit down on the shoulder. And then I'm snuggling that shoulder blade down a little lower and turning my head the opposite direction. And for me, that feels really nice. Again, test it out on you. You should try whatever works best for you. You can get rid of this altogether if necessary. Oh. Just breathing and hanging out with the stretch for a little bit. About 3 more breaths. Apologize for the extra rustling sounds happening over there on your end of the room, y'all. Okay, so I'm going to come back, bend my knee. I'm slipping the strap out from underneath me. And then I'm just going to set that aside. Now, I'm going to pause for a second and do a little bit of movement. Then I'm going to check things out. And then we're going to do some work for our psoas before we do a little inversion and relax. Okay, so you need enough room to be able to stretch each of your legs all the way out, okay? And if the surface that you're working on, I love working on a carpeted surface, or this mat is very slippery, so it lets me glide my foot. You can put a sock on or wear socks, and that'll make your feet a little more glidey potentially. Or you can just slightly, just take the weight off the foot just a little bit and let just the barest hint of your foot hang out with this. Now, the trickiest thing here is that there's a tendency to pull on the neck. And we're not going to pull on the neck. We're going to actually press the head back into the hands and do this from the abdominals. So you're going to engage this upper portion of your abdominals to create a little flexion in the spine. Now, if that can't happen, if you just find you're doing this whole thing with your neck and this just isn't awake yet, then skip the upper body part and just do the lower body part. It'll be worth it. Okay, so we're going to do the right leg first. So you're going to pick up your toes, and with the toes pointing straight up, we're going to glide the heel out as best you can, just as smooth as possible. Stretch through the front of that hip, and then we're bringing the knee straight in, and then again, pressing the head back, curling up. It's not going to be a big movement. That's okay. Heel to the ground, stretch, toes pointing straight up, reach, the foot is flexed. I'm trying to stretch the front of my hip out, and then just bring that in. This is one of my favorite psoas releases, and I might get a new one someday, but this one right now is my fave. So stretch out nice and long, and then we're going to pull this in. Now we're going to do an external rotation, which means we're going to turn the toes to the right. So starting with the toes pointing up, then you're going to rotate them to the right and then bring the knee towards the right elbow as you curl in. Or just pause, you don't have to curl. Stretch out. Toes are pointing straight up at first, then you rotate, then we pull the knee towards the elbow. One more time. Stretch out, rotate, bring the knee in. Okay, so now we're going to do an internal rotation. I'm going to turn the toes, my right toes towards my left elbow. So turn the toes inward, and then there's going to be a little bit of a twist as I bring the knee and the elbow across the midline. Toes are first they face up, then they rotate in, then we bring it in for the twist. So face, top, toes pointing straight up, Stretch the hip. Feel yourself rotate that whole femur bone. Bring it in. And then we're going to stretch the leg out. You can let go of your head for now. Feel this stretch right there through the front of the hip. Oh, just reach out through that leg. And then rotate to the outside, rotate to the inside. Do that a couple times. Maybe one more. Then stretch again through the front of the hip. And then you're just going to glide that leg right back up onto the mat or the floor, wherever you might be. And then just pause for a second. Feel the hip we just did versus the hip we haven't done yet. For me, it just feels like there's a nice little pleasant warmth around this hip. So it feels lovely, but sometimes I can feel like there's been a drop in the hip flexor here, but not every time. It might already be as loose as it's gonna get. So we're gonna do the other leg. So toes pointing straight up. We're gonna slide the leg out as best you can. You're just gliding out, and then stretch the front of the hip. That's the important bit. And then curl in. So foot to the ground, glide it out. Stretch and bring it in. And again, heel to the ground. Stretch that leg straight out. Just feel the length through the front of the hip. Oh, that's good. Bring it in. Okay, so now the external rotation section. So stretch, rotate the toes towards your left side. Knee comes towards the left elbow. Stretch out, rotate, curl in, stretch out, rotate, curl in. So we're going over to the diagonal. Stretch out, rotate in, curl coming across. Stretch out, rotate in, coming across. One more time. Stretch out, rotate in, come across. And then we're going to stretch out nice and long. Reach through that leg and just rotate back and forth a bit. Oh, that is so good, y'all. Oh, and then we're just going to glide that leg right into place. Okay. Whew, that was nice. So all we're going to do is a little bit of an inversion. Now, legs up the wall is one option. I'm going to do just a supported shoulder stand. And to do that, I'm going to elevate my hips just the barest little bit with a blanket. So I'm going to unroll my blanket because I had rolled it up earlier. I'm going to fold it so that it makes a nice little square. Oh, might be a rectangle, but close enough. And then the part that feels the smoothest and most even, that's what I'm putting underneath my hips. Okay? So if you have a wall nearby, just put your legs up the wall. It's really nice. So I've got just the barest little lift in the hip, and then I'm going to take the legs straight up. Oh. And the more I balance them over the pelvis, the more my core has to work to kind of hold me there. So this is another way to strengthen the hip flexors, strengthen the core. And, you know, it's mild, but it's still there. Any core work is good core work as far as I'm concerned. But if you let your legs lean against the wall, you take out that component, but it still feels really nice. And it might be better to relax. Oh. So when I get the legs in the air, I like to do a little bit of a shimmy, a little shake, just to help the lymphatic flow back towards there's big ducts in the body, kind of under the collarbones, and in this kind of, in the groins. And getting lymph to a duct is how the lymph is cleaned out. And here, the thing is, the lymph doesn't have a pump. The heart has a pump, right? I mean, the blood has a pump. The heart pumps, blood circulates no matter what. So lungs are pulling in air, pushing out air. Pulling in air, pushing out air. There's chemical signals and other things happening for nerve impulses. But lymph relies on us to move around. And if we don't get to move very much for whatever reason, it can just not be quite as efficient at getting itself cleaned up. So these little things just kind of help. Moving. Apparently the best thing you can do for your lymphatic system is jump up and down on a trampoline. But I don't know about you, but I haven't done that regularly since I was a kid. And even then, not very regularly. So stay for like another, 5 breaths. circles. That feels really nice. Okay, so I'm going to bring this in by starting by just bringing my knees in and slowly lowering the legs one at a time down to the floor. I'm going to slip the blanket out from underneath my hips. I'm going to take this pillow, because I've got one, and put it underneath my legs. So having something under the legs creates a release at the hip flexor. And especially if you have any trouble at your low back at all, this is really nice for your final relaxation. Now, if the issue is more in the neck, it can be helpful to elevate the whole torso. For me, it's helpful just to have a little barest bit of support under the head. So I'm going to take this blanket that I was using for my hips, slide it under. I don't want too big a space, because the more level my head is for me, the better. But for some people, elevated is better. So elevate all the way from the shoulders up. And then I just tuck it in just a little bit against the back of the neck. And I find like letting my head kind of hang heavy in the blanket and doing a little bit of rolling from side to side is nice. Kind of releases any tension. And again, I don't want so much support there that it feels awkward, but I want just enough that the neck and the head feel supported. I've got a big lump on the back of my skull. And the blanket is much nicer than just the floor. The floor works, but this is better. And then you can also, if you want a little bit of a cocoon, you can sort of take the fringy edges of the blanket and bring them over top of your eyeballs and kind of tuck the blanket in around your head. So you get a little bit of a dark cave, a little dark face cave where your eyes don't, cut off your opportunity to breathe, but you can close in the ears and the eyes, and it makes a nice little, a little private space for yourself. Oh. And it can eliminate some of the distractions, which is nice. Letting the body relax at the end of our practice is so important for the nervous system. So we're not going to move yet. Just bring your awareness, though, back to your breath and let yourself watch the breath come and go. Notice the way the sensation of the inhale and the exhale sort of feels. You're going to take a breath so deep you can feel it all the way to your toes. Let go with a big And then you can start with some movement. I do fingers and toes first. And then stretch the little fingers and toes away from each other. Wiggle them again. Stretch them away. Wiggle them again. And then like lightning bolts are shooting out of your fingers and toes, like the biggest stretch you can get. And then one more time. And then do some little wrist and ankle movement. Give your whole body a little stretch over to one side and then the other. Straight down the middle. With or without the groaning, bring your knees into your chest. Give your back a little massage by gently rocking. Now, you can rock up, but my favorite way is just to roll to the side. Take a breath there. And then letting the head be the last thing that comes up. Sit yourself up. So thanks for joining me for some gentle yoga. Hopefully from head to toe you're going to feel a little bit better. Let's take a breath together. Nice big inhale. Big sigh. Namaste. Welcome to the rest of your day.